that's always the grand question. Can we get our do our intentions actually result in things that work? And when they don't, what do you do? Um, anyway, I was having a live. All of a sudden the video stopped working and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try again. Now, I'm assuming this time you guys can hear me because yeah, because it's always a Oh, no, not again, not again. This darn thing. Oh, there we go. Okay, maybe we're good? Maybe we're good. Okay, Jenny, you're back. Thanks. I'm gonna just attempt to just, have a live again. This is it. This is why we do it. This is why we're here on this planet. This very little cool little Zoom feature is the reason we came to Earth. Okay, guys? Okay, so we're here on planet Earth. We're attempting to heal from all of the stuff. And my last live that just my video stopped working was oh, you can hear me now. Does that mean you know what? My crazy ass internet and all the things, I was probably just talking and having like not even not even having microphone before. Okay. Jenny, I'm relying on you to tell me when things go amok. Okay. So we're going to attempt to do this again. I was talking about how I was using my daughter as an example, and I was talking about how we can have these adverse experiences. In fact, it's a given if you're coming to this planet and born into a human body that you will have pain, you will have suffering, you will have adverse childhood experiences that, the ACE test tests a certain amount. Okay, you are there and I can see you and hear you. Yay! Thank you, Jenny. Test running. Why? I don't know why the last one wasn't working, but probably has something to do with these gadgets I buy to try to make my lives work and then they don't. But anyway, so we come to Earth and I'm realizing that those of us here on Substack are drawn to the healing work and we're drawn to the vulnerability and we're drawn to allowing ourselves to be seen and we're drawn to seeing others in their own process of becoming. And it is a common theme that one way or another, I know people are writers and there are plenty that came here purely to write. There are plenty that are here, with like a growth or bust mindset. And I think they end up in their own little corner of Substack. But I feel like those of us that are here with in my little corner and a lot of the people that I've been meeting, we're here on a journey that involves creativity, it involves writing, and it involves something much larger than that. It involves, put using Substack. And the other day I wrote a note and it was Substack, an app or a way of life. And people were like, well, can it be an app and a way of life? And my point of writing that note was that since joining Substack, it has really become a way of life. And by way of life, what I mean is a way of showing up where you get to be your authentic self. You get to share in your writing. People get to see you, or in this case, I'm doing a live and chatting with you guys, but you get to show up and you get to show up as yourself and you get to show up with whatever it is that you learned, the things that you learned and the way that your unique circumstances and how they helped you become the person that you became, you get to share that now. And every time I see hearts, I do this too, because it's all about the love. And you get to share love with people and you get to share like we all are love in essence. That is the universal currency. It is what is at the root if you were to ascribe a feeling to consciousness, because consciousness is an awareness, that is sort of this miracle of existence, that the universe is this consciousness, and then there's also love involved. It's a loving consciousness, and you can feel it when you get out of your head, because the thing is with the mind is always going to try to categorize, and the mind is like a camera, and it's like a camera and a file cabinet. So it's like taking pictures of, like, or if you're blind, it's using the other senses. You're using the five senses to categorize experience, to put it into a catalog, which is your memory, and then you form this identity based off of it. And that is what being a human is. And yes, the mind can create these really interesting thoughts. Hello. Hi, Sean. Thank you for joining, and James. And so anyway, your mind, thanks, Jenny, is is basically this categorizing, let's just call it, it's like a library. And there's that one movie, Inside Out, that does a great job of creating a picture of what's actually happening. But what I'm saying is that, like, consciousness, I like to talk in my last live too. I was talking about, like, some of my writer friends and the themes that they've been touching on. But who just came to mind is Scott, who's battling autoimmune disease, and he's a beautiful pianist. Some of you might know of him, is Scott with a Skott. And he just wrote a note about how his mind, when he gets stuck in his mind tears him down, because the mind is busy trying to keep us safe. That's like one of its primary functions too, is to sort of be the seat that sort of controls the control tower. That's why I love that movie Inside Out, because you got, like, all the little controller guys up in the head. And so the mind is trying to control it all. And I think, basically for the last, I always dip into human evolution. Ever since we sort of came out of the dark ages, and we came out of what was a more tribal, and a lot of the indigenous cultures that were not mind based. They were in their soul life, in their feeling life. They were very much collectively connected in sort of a group soul, in almost a little bit more in the way that, how nature works with animals, because they were much more attuned to nature. And so it wasn't to say they weren't using their minds and their brilliance and their creativity, but there was this group soul that existed in terms of their ability to live in harmony with the seasons, with the light. Even their dwellings were simpler and much more connected in a way that allowed them to be more connected. And so there was this feeling of the indigenous people that was almost more, you could say, maybe a little bit more innocent in certain ways, because of just in the way that when you look at your pets, like your dog or your cat, and you look at the way they look at you, there's this innocence to them, just like there's this innocence to children. And that innocence is consciousness. It's that loving, sweet, open, trusting quality that we have as adults too. But we have this mind, this little, like, categorizing giant library of experience that's constantly, like, putting it away, filing it away, and defending. We call it the ego, but, like, trying to protect you, trying to keep you alive. And we needed that. It's not to say we didn't need that to get to the phase of evolution where we are now, where I can sit here talking to you with this technology that's been created by minds, and we can write and we can read. Um, what does it mean when the mind is lost? Let me read this really quick. Trying to keep itself safe. I studied evolutionary psychology too. Um, yeah, so I think the way I view it is that the mind, it is a tool, basically. It is a reflector, sorta like the moon, how the moon reflects the sun, but you can't get warmth. I made a note about this. You can't get warmed by the light of the moon. You can get warmed by the light of the sun. So that is probably the simplest analogy for the mind versus the heart. Because the mind, in a way, like if you were to think of a camera, or to think of, like, this categorizing machine that's, like, collecting memories and forming identities and helping you navigate and keeping you safe in a way that has been really developed over the past, um, handful of centuries, probably, we could even say since, like, you know, AD, since that sort of Christian era, the Roman Empire, this sort of shift in consciousness from this more indigenous, whether it was the Celtic or the indigenous cultures around the world that lived in a much more simple collective soul way, where they were thinking, but they were also very much engaged in action, engaged in daily action and in ceremony and in dreamscapes that and in gods and goddesses and like experiencing almost the same way that a young child does, a very imaginative and fluid mind was being used. And it wasn't the seat of where everything was happening. Then, however, according to the way I see it, we got into yes, expand on the heart. So, okay, so I'll tab that, and I get a little distracted when I read your guys' notes, but anyway, so then we go into this age of, like, I've been talking about it since, with really writing, the capacity for the human being to sit down even before the printing press, but the printing press was huge with Martin Luther. We studied this as a Waldorf teacher too. Like when he was one of the first people, because before it was like in the monasteries, the monks would write down, this written language and it would take forever to do a page. And it was all this sort of Gnostic, esoteric, very religious, secular knowledge. Whereas, the rest of the people were just still living in this way that was very much hands on, farming, just trying to survive by living off the land, difficult circumstances, lots of illnesses, very much engaged in this very physical way. And I don't want to say animalistic because then it was like, oh, so you're trying to say that like indigenous are lesser than. No, just trying to describe a way of being human that was much more attuned to nature and simple in a way. Then, because I'm getting to this whole thing of how we got so stuck up in our heads, because we're now at a new phase of evolution where we need to come back into our hearts and getting back into that the mind. So okay, so sorry, I talk in circles. Getting back to it. When people were able to write and they were able to see, the problem is I need reading glasses because I want to read your comments in 1 second. We are going through the written and printing press. Yes, next thing, transition from oral to read. Exactly. So yeah, so you're following along. Sam's sort of writing me these notes about like sort of where I'm going with it. So basically, in the way that Rudolf Steiner, who created Waldorf education, I'm a Waldorf teacher. I was also a Waldorf student. So I use his lens. He talked a lot about developmental psychology, and the education is based on the development of the human being, but also the development of all historical, cultural contexts of these different civilizations. And in his belief, the human being mirrors the evolution of society and the world at large. So we recapitulate, which means we go through our own little evolution as we go from child to adult, that the world and its different cultures has gone through the epochs. He calls them epochs. And so, what I'm touching on is that we had to go developmentally as a human species, we had to go from this more simplistic way that was very engaged in an action oriented, sort of collective consciousness, simplistic, we could say cultural way, where the culture and the family and the tribe was everything. And it was much more connected, almost like a young child, to this dream space where, like, how a young child, it's so easy for them to believe in Santa Claus and to have um the food priest. I don't know about the food priest Steiner, but he was a German philosopher. Anyway, basically we were able to create this experience where, so as humans evolved, then they began to write. Then you were able to, as soon as you were able to read, and I was talking about Martin Luther because as soon as he took what was Latin and secular and like isolated to the priests and the monasteries, and that's a whole nother topic of how Christianity became co-opted as a form of control, just like we're seeing now with our politicians. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I'm even wearing my Rome shirt. You can see it when I was in Rome this summer. And the Roman Empire, like, it brought a lot of things, but it crumbled because that's what empires do, because absolute power does corrupt. The Christian church, in my mind, did the same thing. Now, I believe in esoteric principles of any religion. I believe all religions are pointing to a pure truth, which is that humans are spiritual beings on a human journey. and we're also evolving as a species through these different epochs. I believe that. However, what I don't believe is all of the dogma, all of the scare, doom and gloom, all of now it's in technology. Now we have like our modern day priests are these sort of demigods of these crazy politicians and put them on the pedestals of pop culture or whatever. Anytime someone's elevating themselves to be holier than thou, and then like Deepak Chopra, you see that he's actually a hurting pedophile. So, like this masking to have control, but control from the mind. Anyway, my point is, it's all part of a grander spiral. Like I was writing about how evolution is a spiral. So, once humans, though, were able to read and to get their hands on written, printed text, because print allowed people to finally, and now, same thing with the internet. I'm able to talk to you guys now. We're able to be on Substack sharing ideas at a rate that was never possible before. And yet, at the same time, there are these forces that would be trying to control, just like, the big, I call them baby boy billionaires, the tech bros who are running all these companies. They're not looking out for the same mission that we are now, those of us on Substack, what I started talking about in the beginning, who are here on a healing mission to help others. And um, Anyway, if I stopped, I'll get too distracted if I read your comments, but I really do appreciate you writing them, and I can see that you're joining in, and Sam especially. Wait, not Sam, Sean. Sean is giving me lots of good feedback. I just have to figure out a way to A, get my glasses on so I can see it better, and B, not get too derailed on my train of thought. But my point is that okay, so we have to take the tools, and this is okay, I'm gonna circle back to something I started with. We have to take the tools, be them technology tools, communication tools, and or the tools that the universe gave us, which was our wounding. The school of hard knocks is the biggest school there is. Take the wisdom, the hard-won wisdom from what you were given, and in this beautiful time in human evolution where we have the tools that I can sit here talking with you, you can be texting with me, is a part of this beautiful place that we find ourselves on. We find ourselves here at this point in history with all the same dark forces that have been trying to co-opt humanity for forever. And yet, we're at a different place in our evolution. So we have now come through this time of it more childlike, tribal, let's just call it indigenous way that was very much connected and in a very action based, dreaming into the like I was. Oh, wow, this is what I was going to say before. How you can get like I just did Easter Bunny stuff for my kids. Like they so easily believe in things like Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and fairies, and not to say there isn't. I believe there is a whole spiritual dimension to reality. Just because we're seeing the physical with our five senses, and now we've somehow fallen asleep to the fact that there isn't more. There, of course there's more. And those more ancient cultures had a way to sort of dream in and out, just like a young child does, of these of the universe in a much more expansive way. And yet it was also simpler because they hadn't gone up into their brain in terms of being able to take, once the printing press came out and people were able to take words in their own, and go into their own sort of inner room and contemplate thoughts about life, about existence, read about it, study it. That changed the human mind and the capacity to take in information. And so where we find ourselves today is sort of speed way ahead to the modern age. We have information overload, and we also have the powers that be that have been slowly whittling away at our capacity, that part that came from the indigenous people with all the genocide, the squashing down of the wisdom of those people. We sort of stomped down our intuitive, because I would say that indigenous and that more tribal cultural way had an access to the intuition, had an access to the body, had an access to the heart forces. Going back to what I was saying about if the heart is like the sun and the head is like the moon reflecting back, it's like a camera, it's looking at, it's categorizing. You can't get warm from this. And yet we live in an age that worships technology, wisdom not as heart wisdom, but wisdom as book knowledge. Knowledge. We worship knowledge, like the science community, all those who say, you know, there's nothing. Sorry, Jason, I have technological issues, but welcome. Anyway, you have all these people that are like, you have systems that are built to make that part of humanity, this part that's very artificial. And I'm not saying I'm against artificial intelligence, because we can use it just like all the internet and all the rest of it. But what we have to be doing is we have to be driving from this intuitive, body-based, embodied, the heart like the sun, the part of our humanity that we squashed down when we did genocide on all of the people that, the indigenous and everything. Um, when the part of us that squashed down, we can also call it the divine feminine, is another way that people often language this, because the feminine being the more embodied, the great void, like the indigenous talked about how, I mean, it's going back to the yin yang. Like if you have the action oriented, the masculine force that sort of puts things together and is a force that moves out, like language moving from the mind, moving out into the world. Then you have the feminine, or like the positive negative force. You have the feminine, which is the holding, the womb, the darkness from which everything is created. But when we get too out of balance, whether it's a society that just, I mean, think about people like Elon Musk, for example, that are constantly wanting everything to be turned into techno something. It's this putting these, like, it's putting the mind and thoughts and ideas above all else. The problem with that is that the mind is also like a prison. And this is going back to what I was saying about my friend Scott, who's a writer here, who is battling autoimmune, and how he was talking about how you can get stuck in your mind, and the mind is ultimately, like, I wrote a song about how war is an inside job as well. The reason that we are so susceptible to the leaders we have, to the genocide and the continued atrocities and the abuse, is because even in our own individual bodies as humans, we are also struggling with being stuck up in this crazy mind. And the mind by itself, it'd be like living in a world that only had the moon. How healthy do you think that world would be? Not very healthy. Like, you need the sun, you need the warming experience of that sunlight to melt through the frost, to melt through, to create warmth, to create light. You need a generative force, which is also that same force, that same feminine force that grows life, that grows new organic matter, instead of trying to do it from up here, which is like, sorry, my alarm, is a very backwards way to do it. So, I guess what I'm saying is humans are on an evolutionary journey for sure. And what we have to do now with these tools, those of us on this healing journey, we have to take these experiences that aren't just our personal experience of going through, because of the last couple lives I've done and a lot of my writing have to do with the inner work of healing, of alchemizing pain into wisdom, and how to turn it from a this happened to me, I'm a victim, to this happened for me so that I can now share with others. I signed up, not like I believe it's all like signing up for like things. It's not a way to justify it, spiritually bypass the horrendous atrocities of abuse and pain. But what I'm saying is, on a bigger level, you came in. I mean, just today I was thinking, what if the mission of being a human, what if you came here knowing that your main job was to not be destroyed by the dark pressure of this planet, to hold on to enough goodness, enough sunlight in your heart, that all the forces that are trying to do all the things, they weren't able to destroy you, that they weren't able to take your seed, that loving, like I was going back to that pre, pre-industrial modern revolution age of that innocence that is existence, that is the generative growth consciousness that involves love and connection and beauty and all of those things that we hold sacred, or we should, because they are our essence. When we can tap into that place inside ourselves, That's where the healing and the alchemy happens. And now today's talk was more about what's happening and what has happened through human evolution that has gotten us to this point. That's actually a really magical point. We are at a very magical crossroads, even though the powers that be would want you to think it's all doom and gloom. They want you to be so, even the way they released the Epstein files. Someone on Substack was writing an article about this. Even the way they released it, it is designed to flood you into a place of this is so dark, so much, so chaotic. There's no one helping hold the narrative that you just, same with the war. Like, what? Trump's about to blow up all of Iran. Like, oh no, they're not. Like, all that craziness is supposed to keep you in this fight or flight place, but they can't. They can't anymore. And this is getting back to the human conscious. We have come too far. Those of us who maybe our main mission was to get through these last bunches of decades, for however many decades you've been alive, to have these really intense experiences because you can't be a human without them. And then, though, to take these capacities that we wouldn't have been able to do back in the age of these early indigenous people. Yes, it was beautiful, but the goal is not to go back to being a young child. The goal is to let's take these tools that the billionaire baby boys club, like I always think of the Titanic where they're like, let's go smoke our cigars and congratulate ourselves on being masters of the universe. Like, that's their whole MO. Like, how can they F it up even more? No, we're going to take their tools. We're going to take all the darkness that was thrown at us that they're continually trying to tell us that's all we deserve. That's all we're going to get. That's all this earth is good for so that they can reap, pillage, and plunder. No, we're going to take the tools. We're going to take all of this evolutionary work that has happened from all of the generations that lived before us. I mean, think of your grandma and her grandma and her grandma before, your grandpa and his grandpa, all the people that came to have a life so that you could have your life today and that you could use these tools like my technology that wasn't even working. I had to restart my live. That these writing tools, this platform, you could have a voice and you can take it and you can do something different. See, they can't stop that. They can't stop evolution. And the powers that be would want you to forget that. But what I think is really fucking cool is that we're here doing this work and we have the opportunity. In my last live, I started out because my daughter interrupted me talking about how she had all these learning disabilities that I didn't even realize because I was a teacher trying to tutor her through it. And I didn't have the money until Finn passed and I had more resources to even get her tested, which cost thousands of dollars. We finally figure out she has all these learning disabilities. She starts to like heal her trauma, cultivate a sense of self-esteem. And now she got into NYU and she's going to go become a writer and she wants to help other people. That's going to be her thing, is help people not feel so alone, help people navigate their own trauma, victims of childhood sexual abuse. Like, she wants to help. I want to help. What was your story? What were you given that almost broke you? And now you're going to take these tools from those bastards that are trying to destroy our planet and we're going to turn it around. We're going to weave something beautiful. We're doing it right now. So that's my little spiel. And I have to go get my kids soon from school. But yeah, I sort of like to get on here with you guys and I'm never exactly sure what I'm going to talk about, but I end up I have just so many things in my head. It's that ADHD brain that likes to tell stories. I'm a storyteller and also like I feel like many of us here are in our writing too. Is like people say, "Oh, if you have ADHD, you drop you get so distracted you can never finish a thought." And like, yes, you can see I get distracted trying to read your comments. But also it's the capacity. What they don't realize, what science doesn't realize, is that our brains, getting back to the gifts we have, those of us here on this platform, our brains are wired to be able to hold complex information. And it's not just information coming in the knowledge based way, it's information because we're sensitives, because we're neurodivergents, because we've survived trauma. We're able to take input that's from the senses and from the super senses. And so we take all of it, we begin to weave it up, and we make our own magic concoctions. Like, you have to think of yourself as being like a scientist. Like, you're pouring a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's what alchemy is. That's what you're doing in your life. And then you take your gift, which is your ability to see. And hi, I see I don't even know how to say your name, Aya, but I see Aya Soul. Thank you for joining. You know what? I could even say I read one of her pieces that was so beautiful about like the Norwegian language and Mother Nature and her connection to her aunt. And like you're a prime example of someone that I'm just talking about that like takes all these different perspectives and you weave them in while being excruciatingly honest about what it means to navigate depression and anxiety. Because I think so many of us here, we are navigating all those. That's the thing to sign up to be a human that like I said, what if your main mission was to not be obliterated, to hold on to that spark of light, that goodness in all the chaos of the storm, to make it through that pressure chamber so that you could become a diamond, so that you could be a diamond and shine. And so now we're at that point where we are taking these tools. We're at this very beautiful threshold where, as chaotic as they want you to think it's only darkness and consumption of more darkness, no, we took that, we have shifted it, we're going to revolutionize it together. We are going to be this change. And so nothing can stop evolution. That's the thing. Nothing can stop it. We're a super bloom. I talked about this last time. We are a super bloom, and we are going to take all of the tools that they would use to cage us more. But because you have the courage to go into that mind that is just as sick and hurting as the billionaire baby boys and all the parents and relatives and whoever the hell abused you into thinking you were less than, they have the same mind. They're struggling. It's just that guess what? They were too weak. They were too weak, but we're not. We're strong. And it's not like Trump being like, "Oh, I'm so strong." He's just a little hurting boy like the rest of them, wanting to, wishing he could be, but he's broken. So he uses this whole effed up narrative that's spinning in chaos. But you know what? You are strong. You are so fucking strong. You're badass. And I'm badass. And we're going to take this rodeo. It's not our first rodeo. Otherwise, I don't think we'd have made it this far. We've done this before, maybe even on other planets, who knows. But we're doing it here. We came to revolutionize the pain into something that could be helpful for others. And that's how we rise. And that's how we do it. That's how we do it. Yeah. So anyway, I love you guys and thank you so much for being here. And we're gonna rise together. And I wish you all the best on this beautiful Wednesday. And we'll see you next time. Bye.